Good morning to those of you joining us from North America. Good afternoon to our colleagues in Latin America, and good evening if you are joining us from Europe. I'm Kimberly Ellison-Taylor, Executive Director of Finance Thought Leadership and Oracle's ERP Product Marketing Team, and also a past chairman of the board for the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants. I'll be your host for today's Cloud EPM Virtual Summit, a brand new event we created to help FP&A leaders not only better plan for these uncertain times, but invest in new strategies and technologies to turbocharge their organizations and become growth champions and co-creators of enterprise value. We were already experiencing tremendous digital disruption before COVID-19 hit, and we've only seen that accelerate in the last 6 months. The good news is that the next great growth industries are being created right now, and it's up to us as finance leaders to use the data and market insights we have to make the bold moves that will differentiate our organizations from the competition and lead us to a better future. Now, to help you jumpstart your own growth journey, we've assembled a fantastic lineup of seasoned industry and corporate experts from McKinsey, McDonald's, Accenture, and Oracle. They will be providing you with expert advice on how to plan during uncertainty, forecast when historical trends no longer apply, and predict the future based on new types of consumer behavior emerging over these past months. A new set of FP&A best practices is emerging as a result of the pandemic as we've scrambled to provide real-time information to our management teams to make rapid decisions in response to an unprecedented drop in consumer demand. Now, let's take a quick poll to see which of these new ways of working you've adopted to better plan for uncertainty. Now, our question: FP&A teams have had to pivot quickly and establish new capabilities to deal with COVID-19. Which of 4 strategies are you incorporating to better and more effectively plan for uncertainty? Please select your top 2. Permanently shift to shorter planning cycles, increase emphasis on scenario planning of underlying business drivers, more frequent reviews of KPIs and trigger points, or build zero-based budgeting models for better resource reallocation. Let's see. Okay. So it looks like many of you, in response to the environment, are permanently shifting to shorter planning cycles at 26%. At 63%, you're increasing emphasis on scenario planning of underlying business drivers. 49% of you are providing more frequent reviews of KPIs and trigger points, while 21% of you are building zero-based budgeting models for better resource reallocation. So, for the top 2 things that you've selected today, we have amazing speakers who are going to answer exactly those questions. So we are in luck. Now, for the very first session, and to start getting you some of the answers that you've been looking for and identified in the poll, I am thrilled to introduce you to Michelle Tam, Senior Expert and Associate Partner in the Corporate Business Functions Group at McKinsey & Company, as well as Hari Shangar, Group Vice President of Product Management for our Enterprise Performance Management Suite of products here at Oracle. Michelle's expertise is in the finance function and FP&A process transformations, including operating model, shared service center design, and FP&A capability building. Michelle will be sharing key insights from her recent research based on how to forecast and plan more effectively as a result of COVID-19 and the bold moves she sees FP&A organizations adopting to recapture growth through uncertain times. Hari is a 20-year Oracle veteran and leads a team responsible for product strategy, definition, delivery, and go-to-market activities of Oracle's industry-leading enterprise performance management applications. Welcome, Michelle and Hari.
Welcome to today's session. It's titled Planning for Uncertainty, Bold Moves to Recapture Growth. I'm Hari Shankar, Group Vice President of Enterprise Performance Management Products at Oracle. I'll be your moderator today. I'm thrilled to be joined by Michelle Tam, a senior expert and associate partner in the Corporate Business Functions Group at McKinsey & Company. Michelle has a lot of experience in this area, and she'll be sharing some recent research from McKinsey on this topic to help us all plan and forecast more effectively and really turbocharge the role of financial planning and analysis in leading our businesses through today's uncertainty. Welcome, Michelle.
Thanks for having me, Hari.
Great. Let's get started. My first question really goes to the heart of our discussion today. In your research on how CFOs can help their organizations return to growth and operate effectively in the new normal, you encourage and actually even urge CFOs to make some bold moves in a few key areas. Let's start by having you summarize these bold moves for our audience.
Great. So we believe there are 3 bold moves that CFOs should make as they help their organizations return to the new normal. The first CFO bold move is to bolster productivity. Our research shows that during the last economic crisis, a small subset of leading companies, let's call them resilients, pursued productivity improvements more often and more frequently than others, and that helped them create the capacity for growth during recovery. So there's a lesson to be learned, not only for the post-COVID world, but for subsequent crises. The second CFO bold move was to strengthen the balance sheet and reevaluate the investment portfolio. We think CFOs should take this opportunity to perform cleanup on the balance sheet. For instance, refinancing debt, reducing inventory, revisiting payables and receivables terms, and so on. This can extend financial flexibility while keeping everyone focused on key metrics. Additionally, CFOs should guide peer executives in a review of major R&D, IT, and capital projects, and use this opportunity to optimize the company's investment portfolio. It's very likely that businesses' initial projected returns on investment will have changed significantly as a result of the pandemic. And this will be a great opportunity for finance leaders to quickly shift resources to higher yielding projects. Finally, the third CFO bold move is to invest in finance function capabilities. Some finance organizations may lack FP&A leaders with the analytics and business skills necessary to navigate through the new normal. To build up the finance bench, we think the CFO will need to scout for dynamic, proactive individuals, explicitly recognize their performance, and support their development with new tasks, capability building opportunities, and new roles on the fly.
Thank you, Michelle, for that excellent summary. Clearly, the FP&A function is at the epicenter of many of these bold moves. So in this context, I know McKinsey also recommends that FP&A teams should adopt a new systematic approach to performance management. In fact, we're also seeing that at many of our customers. For instance, some of the customers who have seen big shifts in demand patterns, for example, from store-based demand to online channels, or shifts across different types of products, from luxury products to more staple type of products and so on. They've had to reimagine their planning processes. And some of them, what they're doing is sort of tightly linking and aligning their financial planning processes with their operational planning processes, sometimes called the integrated business planning, right? So these kinds of ideas are starting to take shape here. So really, when you talk about this new approach to performance management, I would like you to sort of drill down into it and say, why do we need this? And what are some of the key elements that you see as core elements of this new approach?
Great. So first on the why, we think few FP&A leaders have probably encountered the degree of uncertainty that they're experiencing now. And they probably haven't ever been asked to conjure up a crystal ball in a matter of days and make the most important decisions their companies have ever faced. As a result of the new normal, we think a more systematic approach to performance management will allow the CFO and the finance team to quickly alert the company to options and opportunities that might be emerging. So we think specifically the financial planning team should focus on 5 steps. First, get a clear view of the company's starting position using a driver-based model and a cross-functional team of experts, perhaps from supply chain and the commercial functions offering input. Second, build a fact base based on current trends and use it to develop a range of scenarios. That includes a do-nothing scenario, but we'd recommend at least 3 or 4, and ensure that they're looking at a momentum case for each scenario, which excludes the impact of any intervening investments.
We're definitely seeing that scenario-based planning approach sort of take hold with many of our customers. So, several of our customers are doing, as you suggested, a baseline, a best case, worst case type of thing. And, what is interesting is they're not just doing these scenarios, but they're revisiting these scenarios very actively, sometimes on a monthly basis, sometimes even on a weekly basis. And the second thing that we're seeing with some of the customers is they're saying, this handful of scenarios don't capture everything that we need to capture. So we're going to start using advanced techniques like Monte Carlo simulation to do a whole range of scenarios, dozens of scenarios, perhaps, to start doing things like, risk-based planning or risk-adjusted modeling. So we are starting to see some of these more advanced concepts that we've all talked about for a long time really start to take hold with our customers today.
I totally agree with that. I particularly like the 4 scenario approach so that you don't just anchor on the middle scenario. That's a great point, Hari. The third step that we recommend financial planning teams focus on is to align on a financial plan with the direction of travel. So what are the most likely scenarios or scenario, and then build detailed financial plans if each scenario were to actually occur. Fourth, we think that financial planning teams should determine the best actions and moves as part of the lead scenario. So including identifying the right set of initiatives and defining execution plans that might include resources, metrics, and timelines for each action. And finally, we believe that teams need to identify the trigger points that will prompt the business to adjust and adapt forecasts and financial plans readily. What are the right KPIs to track? We think it should just be the 5 or 10 that really matter so that they don't lose the forest through the trees if they're tracking too many. And then build a dashboard to review those KPIs on a weekly or sometimes even daily basis so that they can identify when that trigger point has been reached.
I have to agree with you on that metrics that matter point, because we are seeing that sort of repeated to us by many of our customers. And interestingly, one pattern we are seeing, this again lines up with what you talked about in terms of driver-based planning, is that increasingly finance is looking at metrics that are not just financial in nature. Many of the metrics and KPIs that finance pays close attention to these days are operational in nature, because some of the leading FP&A folks believe that I need to monitor operational metrics because they are leading indicators of financial performance. So it's a combination of financial and operational metrics. But as you rightly said, it's not dozens of metrics. It's perhaps 5 to 10 metrics that really sort of tell you what's going on in the business.
Totally agree.
Excellent. So again, like I said, in many of our conversations, we are seeing that scenario-based modeling and planning has become a board level topic at many of our customers, right? So in that sense, FP&A teams are now establishing, again, to your point, a whole new range of capabilities to deal with this crisis. Scenario modeling, rapid planning and forecasting, new KPIs, dashboards, and so on, right? So, but one of the questions that we often get back from our customers is, okay, this is great. We're doing a lot of things to manage through the crisis. But once the crisis is done, we're all hoping it'll be done soon. What do we do in terms of operationalizing or institutionalizing some of these best practices on a go-forward basis? So which ones should we pick and institutionalize forever, right? So can you talk a little bit about which ones of these do you see as keepers?
Great. We think that there's a variety of choices that companies can make in the new normal. None of these are right for every company, so it really is up to each organization to identify what's right for them. But we think in the new normal, companies could choose to perhaps permanently shift to shorter planning cycles, so a shorter time horizon for their forecasts and their planning. They could also increase emphasis on scenario planning of those underlying business drivers that we've already talked about. They could have more frequent reviews of KPIs to identify those trigger points that I mentioned. Or they could build more zero-based budgeting models to really improve their resource reallocation. On this point, McKinsey's research actually suggests that more than 2/3 of companies have improving cost management as a top priority, and more than half of companies are looking at changing their forecasting processes to improve resource reallocation, including looking at zero-based budgeting models.
I'm pleased to hear you say that, because this is very well aligned with what we're seeing and hearing from our customers. There is definite uptick in the interest level and mind share around zero-based budgeting as a planning and forecasting methodology. For example, in a recent survey that we did with our customers, as many as 30% of the participants indicated that they're interested in looking into zero-based budgeting and perhaps adopting it going forward. So there's definite alignment with what we're seeing as well.
That certainly resonates with my experience as well. Another point that we think that companies might choose to do is to really empower their FP&A teams to act as sentinels for recovery and resilience.
Michelle, empowering FP&A is a really important point. You'll hear more on this from Oracle's finance executive, Evgen Gunnar, later in the session. Oracle's FP&A team is really increasingly taking on a very important role, not only in advising our executives on operational decisions, but in many cases actually driving operational decisions. So empowering FP&A teams is a theme that we often hear. And in a later segment, George Rodriguez from McDonald's will also talk about how they're transforming their finance function, specifically FP&A capabilities, given this crisis. So I agree with you. Empowering FP&A is a really, really important point these days.
One last capability that we see organizations thinking about in the new normal is to explore automation capability, which can really help free up time for the finance function to be much more strategic in terms of their strategic partnership and focus on value creation, as opposed to in the past, some of the more transactional or process-oriented tasks that they might have spent their time on.
Let me get to the next question. The role of FP&A is really heightened during times of crisis like this. But some businesses are finding that just when they really need them, they lack the accelerated analytics and fact-based business insights that only FP&A teams can provide. So let's dig into this topic a little bit. So what are some of the areas that our customers should be investing in for really turbocharging the FP&A function, as we've mentioned many times in this discussion?
We think there are several ways companies and FP&A organizations can begin to close that gap that you alluded to, Hari. In times of crisis, when the finance team is being pulled in many directions at one time, we think the FP&A function should strive to convene agile teams, maybe flow to the work pools of problem solvers to scare some of the scarce analytical and strategic resources and capabilities to the priorities and projects that really matter. When financial acumen is in short supply, the FP&A team should reach out to others within the finance function who have those relevant skills, and perhaps even to leaders in adjacent functions like operations and marketing, who may themselves have spent time in FP&A previously. And given the uncertain labor market, this may be a good time for companies to look outside to find FP&A leaders with the required expertise. There's no substitute, of course, for ongoing investment in FP&A capabilities. The companies that want to get it right should bump FP&A talent development up higher on the list of their organizational priorities. They should measure and monitor the function's progress in this regard to drive accountability. We believe an intentional approach to bolstering FP&A capabilities is the only real way to ensure that companies can generate the critical analyses and executive support that they need, both in good times and in bad.
Makes excellent sense. I think I like your choice of words there. Intentional approach is very key there. So, I mean, let's take this further. You know, one of the ways to really turbocharge the FP&A function is to sort of explore the potential of automation. However, you know, in a recent survey done by AICPA, 25% of respondents in that webcast poll cited the need to better understand the capabilities of technology, right? So there is a lack of understanding, or there is a desire to have a greater understanding here. So let's talk about this. So where do you see technologies such as, you know, robotic process automation, artificial intelligence, or machine learning? I mean, these are all terms that we hear often these days, but how do you see them helping to turbocharge the role of FP&A? So, you know, I would like you to really take this a level deeper and give our audience some specific and targeted areas and business processes within finance.
Great. Our research suggests there's a high potential for automation technologies within finance, including RPA and machine learning across a number of areas. But within FP&A in particular, we believe 45 to 55% of tasks are either highly automatable or fully automatable. Specifically, we're starting to see more management reporting being generated by RPA, and leading organizations are going as far as to leverage machine learning and natural language generation to support reporting and, for example, sometimes variance drill down as an example, basic commentary, and some of the reporting narrative that was previously created by FP&A employees. Some organizations are also seeing machine learning to support continuous forecasting. We believe these are important. These technologies free up FP&A time from some of the more routine activities so that they can focus on the much more value-added activities, such as analyzing the opportunities that are suggested by those reports. Really, the strategic thought partnership that comes from translating the output of those reports into action and driving performance management.
I think we are very well aligned with what you just said on this topic. Let me expand on this a little bit and provide some perspectives from Oracle. We are seeing two themes as important enablers of FP&A going forward. I think the first one really is, as you said, automation of activities that are lower value added across the finance function, right? So again, this is substantiated. This is not just our opinion. It's just substantiated by what we hear from our customers. In a sponsored research that we did last year, over 80% of finance executives believe that most activities related to the financial close process will likely be automated within the next 5 years. So again, goes to what you said about automate what you can and focus on the high value add activities. That's the first theme. The second theme is really about how can we enable higher quality decisions using insights powered by AI and machine learning running across not only financial data, but a combination of financial and operational data. Okay. So the same study I mentioned from 2019 also indicates that 70% of businesses that are using AI and machine learning technologies believe that they have better insights on business performance. So these two themes, you know, automation and driving insights on the business using AI and machine learning, these are very, very important investment themes for us here at Oracle. Okay, so thank you, Michelle. I mean, this has been a great discussion. We talked about really a number of strategies that CFOs and their FP&A teams can adopt going forward. But all of us know that every crisis also presents an important opportunity for all of us, both as individuals and as businesses, to learn, improve, and really reinvent. So in closing, I would like you to offer one or two pieces of actionable advice for our audience today.
Great. We really do believe that companies that aren't letting the crisis happen to them, but are instead actively looking at taking some of those bold moves that I described, will be best positioned to accelerate growth as we return to the new normal. While some of the moves may feel like short-term reactions to the crisis, In particular, I hope that companies will look at investing in FP&A capabilities, as I think that is one of the moves likely to have the longest sustained impact for organizations. While our time has been brief today, I'd love to continue the discussion for anyone whose finance functions may be interested in exploring this topic in greater depth. My email address and a link to the article that McKinsey published on this topic will be shared as a follow-up.
Excellent. Thank you again, Michelle, for all your insights and advice today. This has definitely been a very valuable discussion for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle and Hari. Those were some great insights on the bold moves we can make and take to accelerate growth, and which finance and technology strategies we can leverage to do exactly that. For more information on this, please feel free to email Michelle and read the full research report. Now, Michelle will be moderating our next session with Evgen Gunnar, Executive Vice President of Oracle Global Business Finance, Matt Stirrup, Senior Vice President and Head of Oracle's Corporate FP&A, and Victor Rego, Vice President of Finance for Oracle's North America Applications Group. And conversation with Michelle, they will dive into the bold moves they are executing to accelerate Oracle's growth and how the scenario modeling and other capabilities in Oracle Cloud EPM are helping them to shape the future for the company. They will also be talking about where they are investing in Oracle FP&A talent to be more strategic partners to the business. Take it away, Michelle.
Thanks very much, Kimberly. Welcome, Evgen, Matt, Victor. It's great to have you here today to discuss how you and your teams are helping Oracle manage through this unpredictable time, as well as shape its future by making some bold moves to position yourselves for growth in the cloud as the economy starts to rebound from the pandemic. Evgen, why don't we start with you? Oracle's founder, Larry Ellison, is known for seeing into the future and making big bets to realize his vision. And Hari Shankar mentioned in our last session that Oracle itself has taken some bold moves. What are some of the bold moves that you're making now? And perhaps provide us with some specific examples of one and how you're supporting that.
Well, we are never shy of making big, bold movements at Oracle. In fact, it is completely the opposite. Even when there is an economic downturn, we're always investing for future. I will focus on three things specifically: innovation, customer focus, and lead by example. First, on innovation, is we are committed to spend $6 billion annually in research and development activities. We are constantly reshaping our innovation efforts for that vision. We are focused on artificial intelligence, machine learning, autonomous capabilities, and enhancing our cloud application set of offerings. This year, we have made significant investments in infrastructure cloud. As there will not be enough time to talk about every one of them, I will mention just a couple of big moves. We announced autonomous database in dedicated regions. With this, we now provide autonomous services either on your premise with Exadata Cloud at customer or in a dedicated center in addition to our public cloud data centers. We're also investing in a significant data center expansion plan to scale our cloud services, opening 10 data centers in the last financial year. We plan to double the number of data centers in next 12 months or so. On customer focus, we reimagined and re-engineered our go-to-market approach in infrastructure cloud, focusing on customer success. This was a huge effort, and I must say, finance played a major role in this transformation. Last point, we moved the entire company onto our cloud platform and adapted a culture of continuous improvement. Now, all of these huge moves require support from a very resilient, agile, innovative, and a visionary finance function, especially in influencing the investments and resource allocation decisions. In our case, using our EPM capabilities, we developed KPI-driven scenario models for each of our investment portfolios. We developed cash forecasting scenarios. We developed new operational KPIs for each of these areas that I have mentioned. These are just a very few examples. I finish by saying that finance now plays a significantly larger role in shaping businesses, and we must be much more innovative and visionary than ever before.
Thanks, Evgen. That's great to hear. Victor, one of the high growth opportunities Oracle is focused on is your Fusion application suite of enterprise software. As the finance partner to the applications development and North American applications group at Oracle, what are you doing to help optimize investments in this area?
Yeah, hey, Michelle, thanks. I think that, Oracle just continues to focus our investments in our SaaS suite of products. And that's one of the key points in this, in that the integrated suite of products from our ERP SaaS products to the HCM and then to CX, it's a key focus area for us going forward. And as we look to increase our investments in these areas and focus for continued growth, the finance team plays a real big part in doing that. And as customers look at using the products, what you see is an ongoing rollout of new functionality from our development team. They come out in quarterly updates, and it really extends out the ROI for the customers. And we see that every day in how we use our products within Oracle Finance. So as the business partner for the development team and our North America SaaS business unit, applications business unit, my role is not to just to provide data, but to synthesize that data across those platforms and bring that operational and financial insight to the business leaders to help them make the decisions that they need to make to optimize performance. Now, a very real practical example is what we're all going through today with the impact of the pandemic to the economy and each of our companies. So when COVID hit in March, we were just finishing up our annual budget cycle, and we had a pretty stable plan, pretty stable outlook for the next fiscal year. But obviously that all got turned upside down really quickly. And so what the finance team did, and this was really leveraging the investment we had made in our ERP and EPM tool set, we were to leverage that infrastructure, our simplified processes, our standard data sets, our data visualization tools, and most importantly, our scenario planning capabilities on a stable data set. So the finance team had to quickly react and start doing multiple scenario plans to assess our investments and what our expectations were going to be for the year, so that we could provide that insight up to our senior management to make the decisions they need to make. And it was a pretty interesting time from a finance standpoint in how the team, that agile, flexible approach, where it was a small group of folks with a lot of information, quickly analyzing the trends and the changes and coming up with some very realistic scenarios, which we were able to present back to the business for them to make their decisions, and ultimately then settle on a new plan for the year, which optimized our outlook from a booking standpoint, the revenue flows, and then of course what we can afford from an investment standpoint. And it was while it was a very difficult time on a personal level for all of us, on the professional level, it's quite exciting in what we were able to do and provide that insight and quick, flexible analysis to the company. We weren't doing a bunch of spreadsheet work, reconciling data, but we were providing insight as financial leaders to our business partners to help them make those decisions.
That's great. Hari and I just talked about how important it is to be able to bring scenarios from a scenario planning standpoint, and then really be able to translate that through to the insights that matter to your business partners. So it's great to hear you're doing that.
Yeah, thanks.
To you, Matt. So in McKinsey's research, we learned from the last financial crisis that the most resilient companies that outperformed the market pursued productivity improvements more often and more frequently than others. reducing their operating costs by 3 times as much as their peers in order to create the capacity for growth during recovery. What are some of the strategies and technologies you've implemented to pursue radical productivity improvements at Oracle in today's environment that you believe will serve you well going forward?
Yeah, so Ifkin described some of the big, bold moves that we've recently been taking. And in order to do that, we've really been running a long-range planning process in order to develop our longer-term strategy and ensure reallocation of resource and optimal productivity within our businesses. But recently, and particularly with the COVID crisis, we've seen the need to shorten our planning cycles and really focus much more on near-term activities. So monthly expenses or short-term cash flow, or as Victor described, our plans and re-engineering them based on external circumstances that we see.
That's right. Hari and I spoke about those shorter planning cycles. It's really great to hear that you're finding value in that too at Oracle.
No, absolutely. And what that really means then from a finance perspective is we need to be much more flexible, be much more agile in our approach, and fundamentally, we need to be faster. So through our implementation of ERP Cloud, we're really focusing on an objective that we call the one-day close in order to really generate our actual data much more quickly. That in turn can then flow through to our EPM tool, which really gathers all of our data, both financial and operational, quickly. And then we can deploy both driver-based and zero-based planning techniques in order to create the scenarios that Victor described. All of this has allowed us to automate many of our data gathering and analytical activities that previously would have taken the finance team a huge amount of time. And so now we're using that time for really creating action plans and looking for revenue growth opportunities and importantly, cost savings.
Matt, that's great to hear what Oracle's doing to be able to pursue some of those productivity improvements. Are you seeing any common themes among what your customers are doing along those same lines?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so I talk to our customers or prospective customers on a fairly regular basis. And really there are a number of common themes, especially in light of the current crisis. So everyone is really trying to use data in order to gain insight, to help understand where productivity improvements are needed. Increasingly, companies are adopting enterprise-wide data set view and really trying to connect operational to financial data to really drive that deeper level of insight. And so consequently, cloud tools become incredibly important to help us to consume that data, to visualize that data. And so really the kind of end-to-end approach that we adopt through our cloud is a critical enabler for companies being able to leverage this type of insight going forward.
That's great. Hari and I spoke about how important it is for companies to look at both financial and operational metrics. So I'm glad to hear that your customers are also experiencing that.
Yeah, it's absolutely critical.
So another bold move that companies can make to thrive during these turbulent times is to turbocharge the role of FP&A, particularly in the area of investing in finance talent. I know some of the finance organizations that I've seen may lack the FP&A leaders with the analytics and business skills necessary to navigate through the new normal. What are some of the ways you are investing in FP&A talent here at Oracle? Evgen, let's start with you.
Finance plays a much more significant role in shaping the businesses. So this requires a resilient, adaptive, and a visionary finance function. Obviously, it just does not happen overnight. We must invest in our talent. This requires dedication, focus, management mandate, and frankly, a very creative approach to training. So we have invested, very heavily invested actually, in 3 areas in our approach. First, we created a program called Finance Academy. This program focuses on gradual training in analytical skills, modeling skills, soft skills, influencers, technical training in tools and products, managing difficult situations, and so on. It is also designed specifically for business finance, incorporating mandatory training offered throughout the company, but supplemented with multiple levels of specifically designed courses for business finance. Think about this as an undergrad and a graduate program in a college environment. It's very prescriptive with success measurements at the end. As the world changes around us, even as we speak now, we are constantly overhauling these courses, redirecting and reinvesting. Second, we developed a robust rotation program and a talent review process using our HCM products. My management team goes through this process with their entire teams twice a year. Lastly, we also invested in internship and college hiring programs. It again requires a huge investment from management's time and focus, but pays off in the long run. Complementing these investments is obviously the hiring practices for future enablement and focus on diversity. The idea is really to develop a finance function with broad experience in multiple functions, digital technologies, develop thought leaders and decision makers. I'm also very, very keen on providing my team with latest tools and technologies to make their jobs easier, giving them new insights and keeping them excited about new innovations.
Matt and Victor, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, so we've been spending a lot of time really thinking about what finance business partnering is in the future. With the development of technology and the tools that we're deploying, really many of the historical activities that we've been doing have been automated. And we can now really develop our finance function into more of a COO integrated operation. So when we think about this, we really think about it on 4 different levels. So finance will continue to provide financial guidance. We will still need to help the business really understand actual performance and provide contextual reporting and analysis on how the business is doing. But increasingly, we'll spend more time being the operational driver, connecting data sets together across the enterprise in order to find insight and drive action plans. That in turn will help us shape the business with scenario modeling and iterative plans. And finally, the strategist, allowing us really to spend a lot of time on developing strategy with our business leaders.
Yeah, I think Matt, it's a great summary. And what we're seeing in our partnership with you at the corporate level or with me at the divisional level is our engagement with the business leaders. We're much more, we're at that table, at that conversation, helping them make those right calls. And I know that what I touched on earlier in that scenario planning that we had to do at the division level, it was critical and very much valued by the GM of the business that I support, how we were able to bring all that data together in a concise and insightful way. And it goes back to the use of our platform, the data from our CRM system, from our HR systems and the financials, and combining that in a way that's intelligent and digestible for them. And I think it really has made a difference in our ability to influence. We're not just seen as the reporters of data, but we're now that strategist with our business partners in driving the business forward. So it's been a great step in the evolution for us and on our finance teams for sure.
Thank you all. And let me add, again, it is terrific to hear about the Finance Academy that Oracle's developed. Very few companies, in my experience, are investing in this type of capability. And I really do believe it's more valuable than ever. So it's great to hear. That was a lot of great advice for the audience to think about as they plan their own bold moves to recapture growth. Evgen, what final thoughts would you leave people with today as they think about how to turbocharge their own FP&A organizations?
Thank you, Michelle. Well, I will say use this crisis as an opportunity to innovate and reimagine your processes. And use the cloud to get rid of all of that legacy and heavy lifting that is weighing you down. Don't just automate your customization. You need a platform that is agile, flexible, and change ready to capitalize on the new growth industries and market opportunities that are being created right now.
That's great advice, Evgen. Thank you so much. Back to you, Kimberly.
Thank you, Evgen, Matt, Victor, and Michelle on that very insightful discussion. Now, I'm really excited to introduce our final set of speakers. George Rodriguez, Vice President of Finance Transformation at McDonald's, and Patrick Pica, Global Finance and Performance Analytics Lead at Accenture. George has more than 25 years of finance, retail, and consumer product goods industry leadership and oversees the global transformation of processes and financial systems at McDonald's. Patrick has 30 years of experience in finance transformation, ERP, and EPM implementation with client experience that ranges from upfront finance strategy and processes and values definition to application and technology enablement. After we hear from George and Patrick, they have graciously agreed to stay on to answer some of your questions. Please make sure to submit any questions via the Q&A button below. George, I don't think McDonald's needs any introduction, but give us a sense of the size and scale of the company, especially your digital presence.
Thank you, Kimberly. Yes, McDonald's is one of those name brands that's recognized by many people. We're in approximately 120 countries in close to approximately 37,000 restaurants worldwide. And you're absolutely right. Over the last few years, we have made a huge shift into this entire new world of digital. Back in 2015, we decided to do one of our largest consumer market studies, and it was extremely helpful in helping us build what is our strategy today. We learned that we needed to improve in many areas of our business. And so as a company, we really pushed forward into that focus.
George, you recognize that McDonald's needed to disrupt itself to become the industry disruptor. Can you tell us a little more about the goals of the Velocity Growth Plan and how they've changed over under COVID-19?
We came up with a three-pronged approach, what we call our Velocity Growth Plan. And it's about experience of the future, which really focuses on the brick and mortar of our restaurants and how they're designed and give that feel of a really clean, modern experience to our customers. We then introduced delivery. That was probably one of our fastest projects implemented, and it speaks to this concept of agility. We'll expand a little bit more that we've been focusing on as a company. And lastly was really the digital piece with our mobile order and pay app. That was a huge success for us. And it's those three principles of our Velocity Growth Plan that we've been really pounding for the last 5 years that I think enabled us to adapt to the current situation very successfully.
Can you share with us some of the goals McDonald's identified for investing in finance technology, as well as the processes needed to fuel future growth?
So yeah, Kimberly, we really focused on two areas that were extremely important to us. Number one was process efficiency. When we sat down with our teams across corporate and markets, we knew that there was a lot of heavy lifting. And so with Accenture's help and the actual capabilities within the tool, we were able to streamline and make these processes a lot more efficient, liberate them from all the data wrangling or redundant data work, and actually help them push forward in the area of analysis and providing better insight. The other area that we really wanted to continue to improve significantly was this strategic business partnership. The way I describe it is that the business is that pilot on that journey and finance is that co-pilot, and we're constantly helping them adjust, steer, and we do that through the data we gathered, especially in this planning tool that we put in place. We decided to first launch with the EPM set of tools that Oracle has. We signed agreements with ARCS and EPBCS, their planning solution, to really give a two-pronged approach. First, help our global business service teams have a little bit more robustness in the reconciliation process from an accounting controllership perspective. And then from a financial planning, forward-thinking scenario planning approach, we really went into this planning solution with Oracle.
I know one of the things you've worked on was employee empowerment. Can you share a little more about how you took that into account as you were getting started on your journey?
Absolutely. The employee empowerment piece was something that came out right at the beginning. We knew that those generations are used to tools that are intuitive, that they can go out and use and not have to ask questions or ask a technology group to go write a report. And so with the help of Accenture and the capabilities built into Oracle, we have built that capability right in so that our users can, once they're trained on how to access and use the standard reporting and the tools, they can quickly build their own reporting capabilities, perform their own analysis, and continue to provide that strategic business partnership aspect that we spoke to about.
This was a key area that we talked about throughout the early days of the implementation, Kimberly, when we were designing it. Because one of the challenges that McDonald's had in the different markets is an individual market might have insights, but they spend so much time collecting data. They didn't spend enough time focusing on the insights to really make good business decisions.
Patrick, Accenture was selected as McDonald's implementation partner, in part thanks to your Agile approach, which enables real-time feedback and user adoption to ensure a successful deployment. Sounds like it's working. Can you please tell us more?
When we sat down to talk to McDonald's about this initiative, one of the keys that we brought forward to George and others was the best way, the way we recommend to approach these kind of initiatives is through iterations. It's through getting the hands on the keyboard, seeing the application, seeing the processes. And so we initially described this approach as kind of a hybrid Agile, but it's kind of morphed into really a true Agile approach to doing implementations. We found that's really valuable in multi-dimensional planning type applications for users to visualize and see what they're working with, to actually get their hands on an application. And so our approach really is to bring the key business users together with IT, with the project team, talk about what the priorities are, talk about what the goals and objectives are for this initiative, get them to align in what they are. Then we test, vet with them. Then we build a sprint, a prototype. We show it to them. We get their feedback and we roll through. And it's this kind of approach that's really collaborative. It brings together everybody. And it's a key step forward to winning the hearts and minds of a lot of the people on the program.
Thank you, Patrick, for that insightful answer. So, George, how has an Agile approach allowed McDonald's to move quickly and build success for further transformation initiatives? And maybe you could give us just a few examples.
Kimberly, the Agile approach what has been a pivotal part of our success. We incorporated this methodology at the same time as some of our other partners in the organization. What we did was really adjust it to make it that hybrid approach and get the sense that everybody had a seat at the table. The user cases were really important. But I think what also was beneficial is that we took some learning cases from other markets. For example, in Germany, they were the first market to actually use an Oracle Cloud solution on their own. And prior to that, they had been on a 7-year journey of implementing Oracle planning solution on premise. We took a lot of the learnings there, and as they became this first step implementation, leverage that into our planning releases. Then from there, we've now implemented in Australia, New Zealand, France, United Kingdom, Poland, Austria, and we've got another 12 to 14 markets to go across all of Europe. So the agility is what's been really resonating with amongst those markets, and it's been fantastic feedback we've received from them.
I think from a value perspective for McDonald's, right, we really were able to cut down the amount of time they spent in planning, right? So McDonald's had moved from a very decentralized operating model where they did their finance and accounting, and especially FP&A, in a more decentralized manner towards the market. So even though there was common goals and objectives, they were very disconnected. There was a lot of manual effort, a lot of, as George mentioned earlier, a lot of Excel spreadsheet wrangling. So one of the keys that we did was to help put in that mostly standard approach for them to tie it all together with Oracle's EPBCS capability and streamline that process. We reduced significantly the amount of time they spent on capturing data, right? Upwards towards 50% of the time that they were spending gathering data, reconciling data, populating spreadsheets, sending them back and forth via email. We were able to cut that down significantly by putting it into the standard process in EPBCS and streamlining that.
If I could add to that, I think probably one of the best stories we can share with respect to that as well from a finance perspective was that in the early goings, Patrick and I were the team, we're doing a report inventory, and we stopped counting at 400 reports. And then we printed them out, and we stopped printing at 5 feet of actual 8.5, 11 reports, okay? And we decided that, you know, it was a good idea to try to figure out what everybody's using, but instead of going through the exercise, we were able to just come up with a decision amongst the markets and get down to 30 standardized reports with a little bit of, like we said, mostly standard, some adjustments here and there for the market.
Thank you for that, George and Patrick. It sounds like your goals of agility, process efficiency, employee empowerment, and finance being a strategic business partner are great building blocks to fuel future growth. So great news about that. So now as we start talking about some of the emerging best practices that McDonald's has adopted since COVID-19 hit, how are you changing or the way that you work or adopting any of those emerging best practices? And George, I'm directing that question to you.
We were watching and monitoring COVID very early as an organization, and we were having internal discussions. I've got 2 great partners internally from our global technology team and our FP&A team, in the sense that they were understanding very early what this impact would have. And also, you know, I can't say enough of Accenture and Oracle. As we were deploying this release, we quickly adapted, as many have now, into virtual you know, sessions, just like we're doing now. But we were in that rhythm already probably in the middle of February. We were already switching to virtual, just getting ahead of the situation because we wanted to keep the momentum going. We also accommodated our timelines and our resource needs because that initial impact from COVID, especially to our finance teams, was huge. I mean, you no longer planning in a rhythm, you're now planning out of rhythm with new curveballs every day, not necessary at the end of the month. And so we had to adjust our demands on our project teams as well as our corporate teams to allow them to deal with the current situation. And then the amount of virtual tools that we've leveraged and the flexibility, as well as Oracle, who is a semi-virtual company already, the fact that they could adjust at our pace and help us adjust was phenomenal.
From a leading practices perspective, the things that were really important for us when we started, I think only got magnified with COVID, right? That the COVID experience just really put a spotlight on some of the key things. The standards were really important, right? Helping to define standards for the organization, even if it wasn't standard everything, but mostly standard, that was really important, right? It was really important for us to put in a governance process to govern the data, to control the data, to ensure that it had continued integrity. Because one of the things we really wanted was a scenario modeling capability, a capability to say, what if this happens? Then this is going to be the impact on cost, on margin, on sales, on customer, on people, right? So having that ability to model the various changes was extremely important come COVID. I don't think anybody could have planned what really happened, but enabling a capability built on a foundation of control and that you could trust the data is critical to doing that scenario modeling. You know, the other area that we talk about, which is really important for taking some of the manual work out, is drivers. Having drivers built in so you understand what are the core drivers for cost, what are the core drivers for sales, what are the core drivers for demand. So you understand those drivers and you can bake those into the plan. It's more of an analytic mindset that we're helping to develop and build that now also allows us to plan and forecast at different intervals, at different scenarios, right? Whether we're doing a strategic 3, 4, 5-year plan, whether we're doing an annual plan forecast, or whether we're doing revised forecast.
Yeah, Kimberly, if I can add on that, although we were somewhat of a driver-based organization, like Patrick said, we were 100% decentralized. And so now when you you start moving an entire organization into a centralized planning model that is driver-based, it does create a lot of change management. And so that was probably the areas we also learned is that even though we had some of these influences, standardize them and you know, the mostly standard phrase that we've used or mentioned was very helpful in getting the organization to move in that direction.
So now let's talk a little bit more about the keys to success. And I'd love to hear from both you and Patrick George on what some of those are. And maybe you could just provide us some great examples of how this partnership worked. So maybe Patrick, you get started, and then we'd love to hear from George as well.
You know, I think one of the early foundations to the success was the partnership that McDonald's, Oracle, Accenture had. So when we were lucky enough to be awarded the work with McDonald's, we had started the conversations with Oracle and Oracle development to really understand how is the latest versioning of the planning cloud software going to enable new things or address challenges that McDonald's has, right? Knowing that this was going to be a global deployment, that it was going to cross the globe, literally cross the globe, right? From Asia to Europe to the Americas, it was going to go everywhere. We knew it was going to be really important to bring Oracle to the table and get the insights both from their development team as well as from their sales, marketing, and client relationship as well.
Also, the other aspect is that Oracle integrated their development teams into our projects very early. In ARCS, in EPBCS, and now in Oracle Cloud, we have Oracle development team members working alongside of us, helping us and Accenture from their learnings as they go through their consulting work with us, help us steer us in the right direction to improve the tools to make us more successful.
So, but what's next? I mean, you've had some amazing success. Hopefully some of those doubting people are now on board because they see the benefits. So what's next in your finance transformation journey?
Kimberly, we've got a lot on our plate in conjunction with Oracle and Accenture, we're going to be launching into our cloud ERP rollout. We're going to be introducing our first pilot market, which is Australia and New Zealand, in 2021, and then going on a 3 to 4 year journey and getting the remaining 16 markets across Europe. From there, we're also simultaneously implementing FCCS, which is another tool in the EPM suite that is going to help us bring in our consolidations and additional reporting to our corporate teams to oversee all that. Also upcoming, I believe we're moving our on-premise Oracle EBS solution for North America onto the Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. That's a big move for us. And so if the theme sounds familiar, we continue to move into these cloud tools across all the markets. And again, it's just a testament of the power of the Oracle solution and the partnership we have with Accenture and Oracle.
Well, thank you for that. So now before we jump into our questions, I just want to again thank you, George, for the time. You've been so gracious to answer our questions about your journey and talk with us about your lessons learned and best practices. And thank you, Patrick, for sharing with us about your Agile approach and mostly standard messaging. I think that works. Just so many lessons learned for me personally, and I hope that everyone who had an opportunity to view today got as well. Now, before we jump into the questions, we want to bring up a quick poll on how you felt today's program went. Do you agree with me? So many lessons learned. Let's hear what you have to say. This will only take 10 seconds. So let us know how informative and useful you felt today's content was to help you in your organizational role. Now, thank you so much for sharing with us those insights. I knew that you would find it as informative as I did. So thank you. Now, for those of you who can't stay on, thank you for joining us. I'd like to invite all of you to attend Oracle Live, a virtual event taking place on September 29th, where our development leaders and customers will talk about the latest product updates and our cloud ERP, EPM, supply chain, and CX, as well as our analytic products. Please go to oracle.com/events to learn more. So, are you ready? Let's open up for questions for George and Patrick. George and Patrick, we have some questions for you. And again, to our attendees, please feel free to send your questions over and we're going to get as many of them answered as we can. And so I think the very first question, George, is coming to you. And that question is around those monthly updates. How are you consuming the functionality, the enhancements that are coming into you every month? How are you digesting those into your operations?
Thank you, Kimberly. That was a huge learning for us, right? Coming from a prior experiences of on-premise where everything was scheduled, dependent on when these packs would come out. With these monthly updates now, we worked very closely with our technology team, actual FP&A users, because there is a user impact with the updates, and our governance structure that we put in place. We have a small team that we call finance systems under finance transformation. And between those three parties, the users, finance systems, and global technology, we check the updates, see what the impact is, test them, and then approve them for release. So that was a whole new mechanism for us.
Thank you for that, George. So Patrick, would you weigh in anything else, any other recommendations or things you've seen as you've helped organizations?
Yeah, on the monthly updates, I would say, to me, one of the keys is having an organization that's set up that can really review what's changing, what's coming out. Once you get into that routine, it's really valuable to have those frequent updates. In some companies, they think it's a bit of a shock, but honestly, once you get over and get the process established, it's actually tremendously valuable to get the updates quickly from Oracle. It's just like your iPhone, right? When you have your phone and the apps come through and they refresh automatically, the planning and the cloud applications from Oracle is exactly the same way. The key is really getting a group or a process or a structure established around the time you're doing deployment to be able to validate, absorb, and understand what those changes are.
Thank you, Patrick. George, what about those customization requests? How are you handling those?
We decided that since we were coming from a decentralized organization and we implemented that Agile methodology, it was during the process where we drew a line and said that we were going to try to maintain an 80-20 approach. 80% centralized standard process across all markets, and then 20% adjusting based on the nuance in a market. And I can share with you that after the first release, it became something that everyone adjusted to and accommodated. And actually, we were a little bit higher than 80% overall, but it's been very helpful in helping us become agile and more flexible. If that scenario were flipped, you would pretty much be a customized solution, and you'd be constantly modifying, and therefore you would not have that agility and that flexibility to meet the business needs.
That's exactly right, George. That would defeat the purpose of having so much functionality and rich enhancement capabilities coming through the cloud. So I appreciate that answer. But Patrick, what else are you hearing as it relates to how do we manage the requests for customizations?
Well, I think in working with a variety of customers over the years, Kimberly, the reason clients ask for customizations is because they really lack an awareness to what the rest of the organization is doing and how they're doing it. I think that was exactly true at McDonald's. Because they were very decentralized, they ran their processes really on their own, in a bit of a silo, right? In a bit of a cocoon. When we started bringing them together and driving the initiative to more centralization, more standardization, one of the keys for us was to bring all of these users together and have them talk about their process. What was important about their process? What did they do with their process? And the more we got them together and they talked amongst themselves and explained their process, we found that they themselves were driving standardization and having a lot of, light bulb aha moments that said, hey, if you do this, it's easier. If you do that. And so they drove the commonization, the harmonization themselves. We didn't really have to do a whole lot more other than shine a light on the processes and bring them together. And then the second part really is around the technology itself. In the cloud, it can be overwhelming if you try to make individual applications by entity, by location, by geo. So the cost aspect of that also is a big driver to pushing some of that standardization together, kind of driving the people to look for the common ground without sacrificing what's important for their business and their unique process to their business.
And Patrick, while I have you, there's a question about tools and accelerators or pre-built templates that were utilized to accelerate the implementation process. And the question is about what were any and how are they used?
With McDonald's, we used a lot of kind of Accenture templates, Accenture accelerators around the data mapping, identification data. We brought in the early days, a lot of the templates around understanding the process. So we brought in our thought capital around leading practices for FP&A processes, FP&A processes within the QSR industries, within cross industries. And we highlighted that to McDonald's and showed them, here's what the leading practice has, here's the common ground, and then highlighted where they may have differences to help them see where the commonality was to help the decision-making process go along as well. We also had a lot of sandbox environments for the planning applications, right? So we collaborated closely with Oracle as Accenture does on an ongoing basis. And we have a lot of pre-built environments to help us stand up and prototype and let the users see the applications, to see the process, to see the business rules, to see the dimensionality more rapidly. That was really a key to getting users' hands in an application quickly.
Thank you for that, Patrick. So George, there is a question that one of our attendees just wants a little more guidance on doing what you did. And I guess that may be a little bit probably dangerous for some of our FP&A professionals. And they're probably thinking they need a car waiting outside for them outside of work if we were in a pre-COVID environment to say no to customization. So we're helping everyone get their courage to say no to customizations. So can you give some more examples around specifically what did you do and how did you get people to adopt the standardization that you were talking about?
Absolutely. So one of the first things we did was when we analyzed the EPM tool for Oracle is we put a guiding principle to try to leverage the solution out of the box as much as possible. Oracle's done a great job in their planning solution that if you look at how it comes out of the box, it somewhat forces you into standardization. And so as we showed that to our markets, again, we're in various tools. We had, I think, 4 to 5 different vendor tools out in the market, as well as Oracle on-premise or Hyperion. And so each one of these was totally different, totally unique. By then analyzing our processes inside the Oracle tool out of the box, that gave us a strong baseline to stay within that 80%. And then the other step that we did was it really had to be a compelling story for that customization, which really is around the industry you're in. That really is around what's truly unique to a market, because not all markets are the same. And so the last piece is what Patrick mentioned, and I'll give you an example. Data harmonization was a huge effort. We have numerous tools with data aggregated in across all the markets to try to get them all from 5 to 6 different planning tools and get that data into one global centralized planning tool. Required an enormous amount of effort around data harmonization, standardization there, getting them all aligned that a P&L looks this way or GL accounts mapped this way. And the last piece I would say was, for us, it was a big success, was the level of detail. Usually battleground in planning solutions is what level of detail do we want to go to? And from the beginning, we really educated our markets that they needed to adopt a higher level of detail from their planning analysis, right? Focusing on reconciling to the penny or to very low materiality levels doesn't really add any value. We educated and raised that materiality level to allow us to get close enough to run the business at a very high accuracy rate, but not 100% accuracy. So I would say those are 3 areas that we focused on early in the beginning that helped us move quickly.
So we have questions, and I think this could go either one of you. How have you been leveraging predictive tools to forecast recovery rates in such a declining environment with historical run rates?
Go, Patrick, go ahead, you first, and I will give what I can give. Go ahead.
I will say, from a predictive analytics space right now, we're not leveraging a lot of true predictive analytics, statistical data modeling, because I've always believed that to truly get leverage out of predictive analytics, you have to first work to drive the standardization and harmonization. You need to get the data and you need to understand the drivers. You need to make sure that you clearly understand how to build the predictive engine and how to adjust machine learning. So one of the foundations we set when we talked with Mcdonald and with George was step 1 in phase 1 is drive the commonality, drive the integration of the process, drive the tool enablement. And then from there, we are going to go into a more predictive analytic statistical driver engine that will allow us to continue to evolve. I mean, one thing that I tell clients, and George and I have known each other for years across multiple organizations, is FP&A needs to be a continuous improvement process. It's not a cliff event type of initiative. So whenever you're doing an FP&A transformation or a planning transformation, it's not one time I'm going to define a standard, put a tool in, and then I walk away for 10 years. It's not like that. And FP&A really has never been that way. But now, so more than ever, it's continuous improvement. And you have to look at those small strides, those small goals over and over and over again. And where you can test the waters in certain areas, that's what you want to do. But to me, the key is really driven by that data. the standardization, the governance, the harmonization, the clear understanding of metrics and drivers is critical foundation to predictive.
To build on that, Kimberly, I think Michelle said it best earlier, which was you want to start off first with the scenario capability, and we do have that. You know, the baseline, best and worst. That's something we did build into our planning solution, and that was very helpful during COVID. I think, like Patrick said, first get the foundation right, get some predictive capability in, such as scenario, by adjusting your drivers. And then as you evolve, which does take a little bit, I mean, we're rolling out over 20 markets, getting everybody in the tool. That will be our last step in the journey, is really adding that predictive capability. Look, I'm a big fan of Monte Carlo, and I know the power behind it, but that requires an enormous amount of sophistication to get there. So it's, you know, we're on this journey, and it's a step-by-step process.
And George, while we have you, there was a question about the duration of time that was required to do one geographical area. And I guess I would piggyback on that and ask, did you find that there were any geographies that were more challenging than others?
I wouldn't say that geographies were more challenging than others. I would say that the biggest challenge we faced was, one, centralization, two, capabilities of tools in every market. Our teams were always able to get it in, but I will share a little bit of insight is that we did a study prior to launching, which Accenture helped us with, and our teams were spending somewhere between 50 and 60% of their time data wrangling, which gave them a very short window to actually answer or analyze the numbers to see what was happening, right? And so what we're able to do is with the EPM tool is really shrink the amount of time they're spending, probably by half, depending on the market, and really push them towards now being more an analytical side than data wrangling side.
And then George, just a really quick follow-up question before I go to Patrick to get him to weigh in on it, but there was a question around localizations. And so how did you factor in those localization, or did you need to?
Yes, we did. I think this goes back to what we stated, mostly standard.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's a phrase that we're going to coin here, is that, yes, we had to factor in localizations. You know, there are countries that have certain requirements that their budget or planning process is influenced by statutory rules. For example, in France, we have a robust legal entity structure, and it requires the plan at a legal entity basis and roll it up for a performance. So we actually analyzed and came up with a solution, a customization for that market for the planning process to enable them to do their work and manage their business. So yes, you have to incorporate it. The challenge is not incorporating localizations that are either habit, way of things were done in the past. It's really making sure that there is a business or statutory need for that localization. That was where we stood firm, and we're able to, you know, can keep that flexibility and agility in the tool.
Thank you for that. Anything you would add, Patrick?
Maybe a couple of things, Kimberly. I would say when you think about the duration to get in a, say, single country, I think it varies, right? Based on country, based on where a location is versus where they're going. I would say typically we'll talk to customers about between 6 and 12 months, right? Depending on level of sophistication and the amount of change and what you're putting in. One of the things that we did with George and McDonald's was we looked at what could be put in a certain window, because we did want to show value quickly. And I think with EPM programs specifically, showing value quickly is critical. I mean, it's also important to have a vision of where you want to go at the end, so the end game, the roadmap, but understanding the steps where you can start giving people value. You can give them capability. Even if it's not a full P&L or a full balance sheet, if it's just, say, margin, or if it's just sales, or if it's just cash, a piece that then can be evolved and grown and adapted over time was really important. And I think that's a key to the process and the approach that we took with McDonald's and with George as well. In terms of say, countries that are more difficult than others, I would say everyone has their own unique challenge and or benefit, right? Some of it could be size, number of resources available to dedicate to the capability, level of sophistication. Some countries were very sophisticated in their planning and analytics capability, right? And in some cases may have been further ahead than what we wanted for the global standard. And so we have to work to kind of develop that kind of compromise for everybody without having a certain country who's very deep sacrifice too much. So it becomes a balancing act, and you help spread the learnings from one country to another, and bringing them all together in workshop form from the early days was key to that. So they had that understanding, so they knew where each other was at and what they could learn and what they can glean from each other to raise the entire bar for McDonald's FP&A, right? Because that was the goal, is to get everybody up to the highest level.
Well, Patrick, that was a great response. And I want to tell you, I particularly loved your response on Agile and using Agile methodologies, because to the extent that we can get quick wins, show success, go back, figure out if we made a mistake, course correct, and then do it again, definitely takes risk and fear out of doing a migration like this. And one of the attendees is asking something similar along those lines. Their familiarity with Accenture was around waterfall as a methodology for implementing global ERP systems. And you were talking about Agile. So they want to know, what were the learnings between what you at Accenture previously may have done and now using an Agile methodology? Is there some learnings that you could share with the attendee group?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I did ERP for many, many years, right? Back in the 90s when ERP was the wave, and you really only did waterfall, right? And you didn't move to build until you had all of your design locked and loaded, right? So you locked your design, people signed on the paper, whatever, and then you moved to build. I mean, the key for me when I started doing more EPM, and this was back to the late 90s, early 2002, where EPM in the day was a bit of a hybrid. It wasn't truly waterfall, because you did need to see, it's difficult for users to visualize the capability of multidimensionality, so in the cube kind of models, versus a relational database that you get in ERP. So it was very much define the big rocks. So define what the big decisions are, what the key pieces are, build around those. And you have to learn not to build too much, right? So within the Agile approach, the key is not to build everything so you get full functionality, but it's to focus on key pieces and to understand the building blocks as you go along. So one of the lessons that we learned was it matters what piece you build first, right? It matters. So if you make all your reports before you define your dimensionality and your hierarchies, you're forced to build everything early. So you have to learn what to build, what to review, what to go through, and to make sure that users understand that with each sprint, you may not get a full solution in each sprint. You may get pieces of the puzzle, and you'll see it. And there'll be pieces that are just dummied up to make the model work and to make the process flow, but you're focused on a certain capability or a certain function or a certain piece, and you show them the iterative process. So we also found a key learning is to be very transparent with the entire organization about how the sprint process would work. So you show them the full timeline, you show them the sprints, what was going to be accomplished in each sprint, in the objective of the sprint. So you set their expectations early on as to what they're going to get. And some people were nervous, right? Some people are always going to be nervous around this process because it's change, and that makes people anxious, right? When they're in their comfort zone, you're taking them out. So I think the expectation setting is really key.
So, and I think that's exactly right. Managing expectations is key. And I guess I'm going to go back to George to find out what exactly did you do, George? Because in this process, you would have had to have been a change ambassador and a change catalyst at the same time, and the change champion, and also the cheerleader for change. So you had to keep everyone on this journey. And so the first part of this question, George, is about how long did it take? You've implemented all of the various modules of EPM, and the question is kind of from beginning to go live, how long was that in duration? So I'll ask you that question first, and then I'll ask you a secondary question.
Sure. So if we look, let's take the case of planning. We we probably spent like 3 to 4 months just understanding the environment. And as Patrick said, we introduced the Agile methodology. That was probably my soapbox moment, where I went and introduced the Agile, and Patrick's right, organizations are used to the waterfall. And there was a lot of convincing, a lot of influencing during that time, getting our leaders to understand that, who are used to waterfall, that the next generation was more agile. They wanted to get the touch and feel early. They wanted to see it. They wanted to iterate and adjust it. So we spent 3 to 4 months doing that. And then when we planned our first release, which was really the majority of the planning capabilities, that took us approximately 10 months. So from beginning to end, if you look, it took us about 14 months to get the first markets on. And now we just have a standard release strategy where every X amount of months, I think we're down to 8 months now, new markets come along and into the tool. They're minor enhancements to the processes, but we do add additional capabilities that may come up through our governance process. So, that first 14 months was really the time it took us to convince everybody this was the right solution, this was the way to go, convince them on standardization, convince them on a global platform, et cetera.
Oh, well, I can certainly appreciate that. And I think you answered the next part of the question that I was going to ask. And so for one of our final questions, George, there's a question about whether the same chart of accounts is used by all the entities. And so they want to know in particular, if the parent company is in France, did you use a standard chart of accounts based on that format? Or did you use something different, say, versus for the United States? And what did you do in your project?
So fortunate enough, we did have one standard chart of accounts across the globe for all our markets with certain local statutory adjustments. What we did was we did review it, we did adjust it to review and understand if there was a need for additional line item detail in certain areas. So we made adjustments there. And what we then did just this past year is we are moving to an Oracle Cloud ERP solution for the same markets that are on this planning journey around the world. And there we did a full-blown global chart of accounts review, and we will be launching a new chart of accounts standard across all markets with dual ledger capability, right? Statutory and US GAAP.
Amazing news. Certainly news that I'm always glad to hear. And so I just want to give you the opportunity, both you and Patrick, George, to share any closing remarks or things that you would encourage our attendees to pay attention to. And so, George, I come back to you, and then I'll go to Patrick.
So I would say my lessons learned from all this is really, number one, when you're picking the tool, really do your homework. For us, Oracle, right off the bat, was where we wanted to go because of all their cloud capabilities, all their, the way they're evolving so quickly and improving the tools. So we knew we wanted to be that space. We wanted a partner that was an innovator. That was number one. And number two is you really need to get the commitment from the folks. Once you've got the tool selected and you're going to go on this journey of transforming, change management, yes, is very important, but change is constant now, as we've learned. It's really making sure that you get the buy-in and trust from these folks in the markets to really embrace the change and push forward. And so we've been very successful over the last 2 years, and we're very happy where we're at, and which has allowed us now to build up momentum and go faster.
Thank you for that, George. What about you, Patrick?
Thanks, Kimberly. The thing that I would tell people on the call here today, one of the most important aspects of these kind of transformations is for them to be business-led. Where I've seen companies get the most success and the most value out of planning transformations is when the business is actively driving the change, right? It doesn't get driven from a replacing technology perspective, but truly the business sees a need and a value for standardizing, for harmonizing, for iterating, because they need to be faster, they need to be more efficient, more effective. So I would encourage everybody who's looking at these journeys to really work closely with the business, because to get the most value for an organization, it truly should come from the business.
Well, I just want to thank you again, Patrick and George, for your time and answering questions. We still had quite a few more that we did not get a chance to answer, but everyone, you're welcome to link in with us. And I am certain you are going to hear more about this amazing McDonald's Accenture Oracle partnership. And I would encourage you to please stay tuned with that. But as we bring our program to a close, I do want to also thank all of the attendees. If you were joining us from North America, Latin America, or Europe, thank you so much for your time. We hope you found this information informative and very beneficial to the work that you do every day. Now, please, please do not forget to join us for Oracle Live on September 29th. And check out the events page often for exciting new events that we have planned to help you and your finance teams deliver the best outcomes for your organization. I am Kimberly Ellison-Taylor, and I have so enjoyed my time with you today. Please enjoy the rest of your day.